Welcome back to Man vs. Meeple, the show where we talk about all things board game related. Today we have another Essen review. This is a game called Michael Strogoff. If you've never heard of that, you're not alone. This is a little-known Jules Verne novel, and they've based this game around. And I have to say, from a narrative and a story standpoint, it really pulled me in, interestingly enough. It's a 1 to 5 player sort of race game to the end where you're racing across Siberia in order to take down Ivan Ogarev, one of many crazy names that we're going to be sharing with you today in this review.
And you're managing a hand of cards while trying not to make your health go all the way down to zero, and manage all the different obstacles in front of you.
Yeah, it is a game about overcoming obstacles as you just move across this board.
Yeah.
It's incredibly simple to play, but it's definitely one of those luck mixed with risk management games.
So there is a main board in the center of the table. This will house all the different players' markers. Again, as David said, you're racing to the end of the chapter. In this case, this is the city of Irkutsk.
Irkutsk. That's the end of the book. The beginning of the book, you start in Moscow. And you are playing as Michael Strogoff.
Yeah. So you're trying to get your courier through these different locations to actually fight Ivan at the very end of the game. Across the bottom, you have all the different obstacle cards. These cards correlate to the different colors that are on the board. When you move into those locations, you're going to be drawing those obstacles in front of you. You have an Ivan deck here as well that you'll have to fight him at the end. This is the Tartar deck. This refers to the black dice. These are kind of the henchmen that he hired to help him on his quest to overthrow.
Yes, I will inject this review with a little bit of a history lesson.
Here we go.
I know very little, but what I do know, I'll share. So the Tartars, Ivan Ogarev started a rebellion against the Tsar, and he had the Tartars were sort of his followers. So these are guys that are represented by a black die on the board. They're going to move around every round, and you don't want to encounter these guys.
Right.
Because you'll either have to fight them, or they will blind you.
Right, right. And blinding them means that it's more obstacles that will be placed in front of you that you'll have to deal with when you fight Ivan at the very end of the game. You have an actual player board in front of you. This player board is going to house your health track. Your health track is important because it allows you to advance on the main board. On the bottom, you have a location to actually place cards that you've acquired. These cards will be able to trigger at the end of each round and possibly give you benefits for the cards that are underneath of it.
Right. It will end up being sort of a stack of abilities. This thematically represents the experience that you're gaining as you travel across the Siberian outback, if
Everyone starts with their own specific ability. For instance, at the end of the round, if a 2 is rolled on the white die, I will draw a card in my hand. Your number may be different compared to all the other different players that are at the table. At the top of the main board, you have all the different companions that can come into play. These will come into the action phase, but these companions will allow you to do very specific abilities as an optional action at the start of your turn.
Right. So let's get to the turn, because this game, like I said, it's a very streamlined game and the turns go pretty lightning fast.
Right.
As Jeremy just mentioned, at the very beginning of your turn, you're going to choose whether or not you want to use the power of an ally. At the beginning of the game, you randomly choose one of the ally cards and put them in the A slot.
Yep.
There's 4 slots here, A, B, C, and D, and they can all hold allies. These may or may not come out at varying times in the game depending on card flips at the end of each round.
Right.
Some of which can be replaced, so don't get used to the power that's on there with that one ally because he might get kicked out.
Yep.
So whether you do that or not, then you move on to the main meat of your turn, and that's choosing one of 3 different things that you want to do.
So at the beginning of the game, each player will be dealt 5 particular action cards. These action cards have a variety of different things on them. If you look at the top of the cards, they have a color-coded and a picture or a portrait of a particular character. These refer directly to the companions that can be in play. You can only activate these companions if you have one of the cards that refers to that player. And then the bottom of them are only going to be activated at the end of a round by flipping up certain cards. However, there is a symbol or an icon up here. These are the interactions that you're going to be placing with the different obstacles in front of you. We'll get into that in a moment. However, I'll talk about the first action. It's simply advancing, and that is advancing 1 space on this track.
Right.
When you advance, you have to move your health marker down 1 space. If it is on the 0, you don't die, but you can't advance anymore. You're going to have to rest to be able to do that. David will talk about resting here in a moment. Anytime you advance, you're also going to flip the card, depending upon the color of the location, and you're going to take that card and place it face up in front of you. Now, these again are the obstacles that you will be facing through the course of the game. These will take actions or actions against you depending upon the icons that are flipped. Now, I have two different icons. I have one with a mask and then one with a piece of thunder. Nothing's going to happen to me. However, if you flip something with the same icon as a previous one, all the cards that you have in front of you are going to activate.
Yeah, there's a little diamond on each card that has not too many different nasty things, but a few nasty things that happen to you. But when nasty things happen to you in this game, a lot of nasty things can happen to you in this game.
Yep.
We didn't mention, at the very beginning of the game, you're also going to have one of these cards to begin with. So you're already starting in a situation where you have an icon that you need to avoid.
Yep.
So every time you advance, you are going to be taking that risk.
Yeah.
You're going to lose health, you're going to move forward, you're going to flip that card, and if it matches, you have to go through and remedy all of those issues. Some of them will flip cards, some of them will make you lose more health, some of them will make you have to discard a card out of your hand.
Yeah.
Usually they won't take you out of the game by any means, but they will set you back significantly because you have to deal with all of that before you can advance again. You can't advance with 0 health, you can't advance if you have a card flipped over, and you can't advance if you have two of the same icons still residing in your tableau. Right, so whether you can't advance or you don't want to advance, the other thing you can do, which you'll do often in this game, is rest.
Yep.
And when you rest, you can do one of a few different things. And you can do two of these. You can either draw 2 cards, so you can do that twice and get 4. You can heal, again, twice, or you could heal and draw 2 cards.
Yep.
And then the last thing is you can take one of the cards that may have been flipped over and flip it back over. It's important to realize here, when you flip it back over, if it matches an icon, that's not going to activate the nastiness again. That only happens when you advance in this game.
Right. And the last action is to resolve dangers. The dangers are, of course, the obstacle cards in front of you. Each of these dangers correlates to one of the icons. You have to get rid of these icons. You have to get rid of these cards because the more they build, the more they're possibly going to activate. When you resolve these, you're physically taking these tokens and putting them over there and getting rid of the cards, period. Talk about how you resolve these and how you get rid of these.
Yeah, so resolving these cards can be a little tricky. There's a few different rules here that you need to follow. The most recent card that you've laid down, which is going to be your rightmost card, that can be resolved in a number of different ways. The first of which is using one card from your hand that has that exact matching icon. The rightmost card, or the most recent, is the only card that can be resolved this way.
Yep.
However, when you do resolve it, then the next card effectively becomes the most recent card, so then you can use one card on it as well. Now, regardless of that, whenever you want, you can use 2 identical icons from your hand to deal and resolve any card in any order. You don't have to resolve the rightmost. You can use 2 cards that way, and then finally, the last way to resolve, and probably the least beneficial, is just literally taking a hit point down on your player board and resolving an icon that way.
Now, when you resolve the cards, all the cards that you resolve are going to go into your hand. You're going to look through these cards that you've resolved, and you get to pick one of them to place underneath of your board. All of these have very cool actions at the bottom that could key off of the end of the round rolls and give you a benefit. All the rest of them are simply going to go into a discard pile.
Right, that is probably one of the cooler and more strategic elements of this game, and there are very few strategic elements, I think.
Right.
But adding those abilities and the kinds of abilities, which really boil down to the die rolls that's going to happen, really have an impact on how you can power back up potentially at the end of a round. It's also important to realize these cards have different numbers of icons on them.
Yeah.
So these obstacles start with just one icon.
Yeah.
That's simple enough. This purple location is a grizzly bear. It's always a grizzly bear. You're going to have to deal with it.
Yeah.
It has 2 icons on it, and it's always the same 2 icons.
Yeah.
So if you haven't figured it out, when you flip over that bear, you already immediately have 2 icons of the same type, and you'll have to deal with it.
Yeah.
We didn't mention when you advance, you actually, when you flip over a card like this, and I'll show you the bear, the 2 icon cards have one normal icon that has a white background and one that has a black icon. The black ones, as soon as they're flipped, you can resolve that black icon only with a card out of your hand that has that exact matching icon.
Yeah.
If you can't do that on this bear, you're going to deal with all of the penalties.
Yeah.
And also note, the bear only has penalties.
Yeah.
There's no special good ability at the bottom of the bear.
Yeah. So you're going to keep doing these rounds after rounds until you get to the end. But however, what's going to happen at the end of a round is once it gets around to the table to the first player. If I am the first player, before it hits me after David's turn, I have to flip over one of these action cards. The bottom portion is the portion that's going to activate. There's 3 different things that happen here. 1, it's going to move Ivan Ogaroff an X number of spaces on the board. When he gets to this location, that's bad.
Yes, you don't want him to get to the end of the game, or end of his track, because that's basically what you're racing against.
It's a built-in timer.
When he gets to the end of the track, the game is not quite over, but it's pretty close.
Yeah. If you look at your summary card, there's a whole list of things that could possibly happen with the middle card, or the middle location on this card. That's like drawing a card, getting to do a specific action, and so forth.
Yes, and usually it's a white die, in which case you're going to roll the white die in the game, and depending on the number that comes up, all the players get to activate those abilities that we talked about accordingly.
Yeah.
I don't have any 4s, so if a 4 came up, I'd be out of luck.
Yeah, so the more diverse you become with your player board and the cards that you've resolved, the more benefits you're going to get round after round.
Right.
And the last thing is that the Tartar dice is going to move to a very specific locations. If you look at this main board, you're going to notice black locations. These are the locations that the Tartars are going to be moving through the course of the game. It's going to tell you an exact location they move to. In this case, they're going to move to the number 8. Below this is a die modifier, so that it's going to modify the die and either make it 1 pip higher or 1 pip lower. So they're going to be changing through the course of the game.
Yeah, or it can even stay the same. The pips on the black die represent the strength of the Tartars.
Yep.
So we'll talk about that for a moment. The Tartars work in one of 2 ways.
Yeah.
The first one is that once you've progressed down towards to where they hang out, if you move into their space, you have to fight them. In which case you're going to roll the white die for yourself, and you have to meet or exceed the value on the Tartar dice. If you do, it's all good. You just move on. If you don't, you stay there, but you take 1 point of damage on your hit points.
Yeah, this is one of the things in the game that's just pure luck. There's no way to mitigate that dice.
Right.
So.
Right, and it all depends on how the Tartars have either risen in strength or maybe they've lowered in strength, depending on where they've moved here. The second thing is if the Tartars move into your location, which can happen. If they move into your location, there is no battle. They go through a ritual, according to the novel, where they will blind you with a
searing hot saber.
Searing hot saber. And the thematic representation in here is that you draw one of these cards here. And you'll notice these both have black icons at the top. But if you can't see, there's also a little lock on those icons. You're going to take this card and you're going to put it in your leftmost position on your tableau of cards, whatever obstacles you might have. This card cannot be resolved, period, until you're fighting Ivan Ogarev at the end of the game. So it basically makes it so you have 2 more icons that you have to worry about constantly.
So again, the goal is to move your courier all the way to Irkutsk. What happens in Irkutsk when you have to actually fight Ivan himself?
Yeah, so Irkutsk, it's a kind of a little bit of a mini boss fight, or it is a boss fight. Again, like the rest of the game, it plays out very simply. You're going to go to Irkutsk, and no matter where Ivan is on the track or whether he's at the end, you're going to first have to resolve all of the cards that you still have in front of you. So, moral of that story is you don't want to go to Irkutsk with a lot of cards in front of you.
And not a lot of cards in your hand.
And not a lot of cards in your hand. You really want to be prepared before you go into Irkutsk. Then, after you've resolved all those cards, depending on where Ivan has moved on his track, if it's this far, he's going to have 3 cards that you have to face, or 4. If he's moved all the way close to the end or to the end, you're going to have to deal with 5 of his cards. His cards are largely 1 icon cards.
Yeah.
They'll flip up, and you can resolve these in a number of ways. I can face this if I have a card in my hand that has that same symbol. That one's done. This one comes up. Say I don't have that symbol. I can take a hit point of damage. So you're going to want to go in there with some hit points.
Yeah.
And finally, there are some cards in here that are a little different. This one has the black die, the Tartar die. In this case, when this comes up, you have to immediately roll the white die, and you're basically facing his Tartars at whatever their strength is at that moment. And if you fail, you take another hit point of damage, but you get past that card either way.
Yeah.
So there's a number of cards you get through. If you get through all the cards according to the track, you've won the game. You've beat Ivan Ogarev.
Yeah.
If you fail, you're dead. You're out of the game. The rest of the players can continue on. But the interesting thing that happens at that point, once Ivan has reached Irkutsk, every round, at the end of every round, you're not going to draw a card anymore like you were. You're going to just roll this white die. When you do, good news, you get to activate all your cards as usual. Bad news, the Tartars are going to move that number of spaces towards Moscow, which was your starting location.
Yeah.
Once the Tartars get to Moscow, if they get to Moscow, everybody at the table loses.
Yeah.
Try again.
Yeah. Talk about review.
Yes.
I like the theme here. This is definitely, I mean, the Michael Strogoff name has no bearing to me. I've never heard of this before.
Me neither.
I know a lot of literature, but this, it's just over my head. I've never heard about it before, which is cool. Also, the graphic design on this game is awesome. It looks like a Euro. It looks like Marco Polo.
It does.
The artwork is fantastic.
Beautiful looking game. Everything they've done here, Marco Polo is a great example. Marco Polo, Russian Railroads, it has that very thematic board, and it looks beautiful.
And the mechanics are great. There's no problem with the gameplay. However, I just don't find it intriguing for me. It's too luck based.
It has quite a bit of luck.
Yeah, you're completely beholden by the cards that are drawn and the cards that you draw up. You have no real ability other than drawing more cards in your hand and trying to get a good variety of them in your hand at any given point. However, if you draw poorly, there's really nothing you can do other than to take health and possibly get rid of 2 icons.
Right, and I think the designers would even say this is, at its heart, a push your luck game.
Yep.
Jeremy and I are having this conversation before the review. I really feel like this reminds me of a lot of mechanics that I found in a lot of co-op games. A lot of co-op games, in my opinion, or at least the ones I've played, whether this is not co-op in any way, shape, or form, but the mechanics that are present here, where you're basically building up your supply of things to try to deal with a situation that might happen, that might get flipped over at any given time, like a pandemic. You can be ready for it, and then you flip over New York and you're ready.
Yeah.
Or you can push your luck and take your chances that New York isn't flipped.
Yeah.
That's how it feels to me every time you go to another location in this game, and especially when you're fighting Ivan Ogarev in Irkutsk. I can't imagine how many times I've said Irkutsk in this review, but
yeah, I mean, you definitely have to be prepared every single time that you move into a new location. If you don't have the right cards or even a good selection of them, you're going to be hurting. For sure.
And that's kind of the crux of this game is: do you take the time to prepare, knowing that while you do that, Ivan Ogarev is getting closer and closer to the end?
Yeah,
that time is just ticking down. Or are there moments where you calculate your risk and take a chance and get a little lucky? And it takes a mix of both of those things, I think, to win this game. You have to take a chance and have a little luck involved. And again, that's how I feel in a lot of co-op games, where it comes down, those great co-op games where you flip that card and it's exactly what you were hoping for, or it's exactly what you weren't hoping for and it's a disaster.
So yeah, this is a very unique game from a very obscure IP from Jules Verne. A novel called Michael Strogoff, plays 1 to 5 players, can be played solo, ages 12 and up. Takes about 60 minutes to get through. If you guys have questions about the game, make them in the comments below. Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and everything else that we do here at Man vs. Meeple, and we will catch you guys next time.
Bye-bye.
Season 2 of Man vs. Meeple is sponsored in part by Cool Stuff Inc. Cool stuff in stock at coolstuffinc.com. So that is Michael Strogoff, not to be confused with Stroganoff. I was going to try to say it normally. I couldn't get through. I tried.
I challenge you to do it.